The wind was sharp that evening, carrying the smell of pine and the faint dampness of an approaching storm. We had taken the mountain road countless times, but never had it felt so dangerous, so fragile beneath our feet. My husband's hand was steady in mine as we walked, though we both felt the tension radiating from the son who walked a step behind us. Our son, our only child. He had insisted we come out here. "Fresh air will do you both good," he'd said too cheerfully. The smile never reached his eyes. Something cold lingered there. Something I hadn't wanted to believe. He was 28 now, a man with his own life. But still ours, our flesh, our years of sacrifice, our love, and yet, when we reached the overlook where the cliff opened wide into a valley of shadows, it all shattered. I remember the moment as if it were frozen in glass, the crunch of gravel, the hush of the wind, the sudden force from behind, violent, unhesitating. My body lurched forward, arms flailing for something to hold. My husband's startled cry cut through the air, and then we were falling. The world spun in a blur of stone and sky. I felt my shoulder slam against rock, pain exploding in my ribs. My head struck something hard, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then, as quickly as it began, the fall stopped. We tumbled onto a narrow ledge hidden below the lip of the cliff, half shielded by scrub and stone. I tasted blood. My chest burned with shallow breaths. My vision flickered as I turned toward my husband. He was lying on his side, his face pale but his eyes sharp with terror. And then I heard it. Footsteps above. Our son's voice, faint but clear. He was peering over the edge. "Gone," he muttered. "It's done." I felt the world tilt again, but not from the fall. My son, the boy I'd cradled in my arms, the child I'd kissed goodnight, had just tried to kill us. I must have whimpered, because my husband's hand clamped over mine with desperate strength. He pulled himself closer, his lips brushing my ear. His voice was broken, a ragged whisper. "Pretend we're dead." Those words carved themselves into me. Pretend. Don't move. Don't breathe. Don't let him know. I forced myself to go still, though my body screamed with pain. My husband's chest rose and fell in shallow, careful breaths. Above us, our son lingered, watching, waiting. Finally, his footsteps retreated, slow and steady, like a predator certain of its kill. Silence descended. The valley stretched out below us, endless and merciless. The drop beyond our ledge went down hundreds of feet. We were trapped between death and betrayal. I tried to speak, but my husband shook his head. "Not yet," he mouthed. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, but his gaze was fierce. He was alive, and for now, that was enough. Minutes passed like hours. My mind reeled. Why would he do this? Why now? He had always been distant, yes, but we thought it was just the way of grown children. Busy, distracted, caught up in their own lives. We had helped him through debt, through heartbreak, through the dark days when he'd lost his job. We had stood by him, and now he had tried to erase us. The air grew colder as the sun dipped lower. I shifted slightly, wincing as pain shot through my ribs. My husband touched my arm again, steadying me. "We have to wait," he whispered. "He'll come back. He'll want to be sure." And so we lay there, two broken bodies playing dead, while the night began to settle around us. It didn't take long. The crunch of gravel returned, louder this time. My heart pounded so hard I feared he would hear it. I closed my eyes, forcing stillness, forcing silence. Still nothing. He muttered above, then chillingly, "Better be." A pause. The scrape of metal. Was he throwing rocks? Testing for movement? Something clattered near our ledge, spraying dust. My body flinched, but I bit down hard, holding back the gasp that rose in my throat. I heard him curse softly, then retreat again. When the silence stretched longer this time, my husband exhaled shakily. "We can't stay here all night. We need to move. Carefully." The ledge was narrow, but there was a slope of loose earth and rock leading down toward a stand of trees far below. Dangerous, yes, but not impossible. Staying here meant waiting for him to return. Maybe with a flashlight. Maybe with more certainty in his heart. I nodded, though fear clawed at me. It took every ounce of strength we had to shift, to crawl inch by inch along the ledge. My legs trembled, my head spun, but my husband urged me forward. The smell of earth and pine grew stronger as we neared the slope. Finally, we reached it, clinging to branches and roots as we began the slow, agonizing descent. Every slip sent rocks tumbling into the void, echoing like gunshots. Every movement felt like a scream against my battered body. But step by step, grip by grip, we descended. When we reached the bottom at last, I collapsed onto the damp ground, tears burning my eyes. My husband lowered himself beside me, his arm trembling as he wrapped it around my shoulders. "We're alive," he whispered, "but he can't know." In the distance, faint through the trees, came the sound of an engine starting. Our son's car. He was leaving, relief mingled with horror. Alive? Yes, but abandoned. Betrayed. Hunted, perhaps, if he ever suspected. I pressed my forehead to the earth, feeling the cold seep into my skin. Why would he do this? I asked, though the question was more to the darkness than to my husband. His silence was heavier than any answer. Above us, the cliff stood tall and merciless, and somewhere on the road beyond, our son drove away, believing he was free. But we were still here, and we were not done. Not yet. The forest swallowed us whole. By the time the cliff was just a jagged scar behind us, darkness had fallen. Each step deeper into the valley felt like diving into a secret the world wanted buried. My husband leaned heavily against me, his breath ragged, but he kept moving. I could feel the stubborn will in him, the same stubbornness that had carried us through 3 decades of hardship together. When at last we stopped, it was by a fallen tree near a creek. The water gurgled gently, mocking the chaos inside me. My ribs throbbed with every inhale, and I was certain something was broken. My husband lowered himself to the damp ground, wincing as he pressed a hand to his side. "We'll rest here for the night," he said quietly. His voice was steady, but the pallor of his face betrayed the pain. I sank beside him, pulling my torn jacket tighter around my shoulders. The night was alive with the rustle of unseen creatures, and though we were far from the road, I could not shake the sense of being watched. The betrayal burned in my chest more fiercely than my injuries. "Our son," I whispered, as if saying the word might conjure him from the shadows. "Why, David? Why would he do this?" David's gaze was fixed on the water. His silence stretched until it became unbearable. Finally he said, "People kill for money. For secrets. For freedom. Maybe all 3. I thought back over the last months. His odd silences, the late-night phone calls he quickly ended when we entered the room, the way he avoided our questions. I had chosen to dismiss them as the private matters of an adult child. But now, strung together in hindsight, they painted a darker picture. My husband leaned closer. "We can't think of him as our boy anymore. Not until we understand what's driving him. To survive, we have to think of him as the enemy." The words lodged like thorns in my heart. Enemy. My son. We slept little that night. Every crack of twigs, every hoot of an owl jerked me awake. My dreams were worse. Visions of falling, of hands shoving me into darkness, of my son's face blank as stone. When dawn broke, pale light filtering through the canopy, relief swept over me. Daylight meant clarity. But daylight also meant we had to move. We followed the creek downstream, hoping it might lead to a road or settlement. The water was cold against my swollen fingers as I cupped it to my mouth. Hunger gnawed at me, but fear gnawed harder. By midday we heard it. An engine, faint, then closer. We froze behind the brush as a dark SUV rolled slowly along a dirt trail parallel to the creek. My heart stuttered when I saw him in the driver's seat. Our son. He was back. The vehicle stopped not far from where we crouched. He stepped out, phone pressed to his ear. His voice carried faintly on the breeze. "Yeah, it's done. They're gone. Both." I said, "I'm sure." I exchanged a horrified glance with David. Who was he talking to? The pause was long. Then he added, "I'll handle the paperwork. Once everything transfers, we're clear. Paperwork. Transfers." My stomach twisted. He was talking about our estate, our accounts, the home we had built brick by brick. The call ended, and he leaned against the car, running a hand through his hair. For the first time, I saw cracks in his armor. He wasn't triumphant. He was tense, jittery, like a man standing on the edge of his own cliff. When he climbed back into the SUV and drove off, the forest seemed to exhale. David gripped my arm. "Did you hear that?" I nodded, trembling. "He's planning to claim everything." "Which means," my husband said grimly, "he has to make sure we stay dead." The words chilled me more than the morning air. He would be back again. Maybe with others. Maybe with weapons. We moved deeper into the woods, away from the creek, into terrain less likely to betray us. Hunger gnawed sharper now. We foraged for berries, chewed bitter roots, anything to keep strength in our bodies. My husband's side worsened. He pressed his arm there constantly, hiding groans behind clenched teeth. That night, as we huddled beneath a tangle of branches for shelter, I finally broke. "I don't understand," I whispered fiercely. "We gave him everything. We sacrificed for him. How could he—" My voice cracked. "How could our own son push us off a cliff?" David's eyes glistened in the dim light. "Love doesn't blind everyone the same way. Some people see love as weakness, as something they can exploit." I wanted to argue, to shout that he was wrong, that there had to be some mistake. But deep down, the truth gnawed. I remembered the coldness in my son's eyes when he told us to take this walk, the flat tone in his voice, the way he didn't look back when we fell. Something had broken inside him long before that night, and we hadn't seen it. We fell into uneasy silence, the forest murmuring around us. Hours crawled past, broken only by the sound of David's strained breathing. Sleep finally claimed me in fits, but it was not restful. I woke to the faint glow of dawn and the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate. My breath caught. I nudged David awake. His eyes snapped open and he squeezed my hand. Together we pressed into the undergrowth, holding our breaths. A shadow passed between the trees. Then another. Not one man, but two. Both carried flashlights. One voice cut through the still air. "Spread out!" They couldn't have gone far. My heart lurched. He hadn't come alone this time. He had brought help. I buried my face in the earth, every muscle trembling. The hunt had begun. The woods became a cage. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, made my heart hammer against my ribs. We lay flat on the cold ground, hidden beneath brush so thick I could feel branches digging into my skin. My husband's hand gripped mine, trembling but firm. The voices drifted closer. "Check the creek," one man said, his tone sharp, impatient. "If they survived, they'd need water." Another answered, low and gruff. "I still don't get why we're looking. Didn't you say it was a clean job?" And then, the voice that turned my blood to ice. Our son, calm, commanding, almost rehearsed. It was, but accidents don't always finish the way you plan. I want to be certain. I bit down hard, tasting blood. His footsteps crunched against leaves just yards away. He was so near I could smell the faint trace of his cologne, the one I had bought him years ago for his birthday. A sick memory twisted in my chest. The other man spoke again. "If they're alive, why not just call the cops? File missing persons. Play it smart." A pause. Then our son snapped. "Because the police would ask questions I don't want answered. We handle this quietly. Understood?" My husband and I exchanged a look. What questions? What was he hiding? The footsteps moved off, spreading wider. I barely dared to breathe until the glow of their flashlights faded into the trees. Even then, I did not relax. They were still out there, combing the woods. Hunting. We waited what felt like an hour before David whispered, "We need higher ground. Somewhere to see them coming." Moving was agony. My ribs screamed, my legs felt like lead, but adrenaline kept me upright. We crept uphill, weaving through the trees until we reached a rocky outcrop. From there, the forest stretched below us. Shadows shifting, beams of light slicing through the darkness. Our son's voice carried upward. Check near the ridge. If they fell but survived, they'd head down toward cover. I pressed a hand to my mouth, tears burning my eyes. He spoke of us as though we were strangers, burdens to erase. Hours passed like days. The search spread wide, then narrowed again. Finally, the men regrouped by the dirt trail where the SUV waited. They're gone, the gruff one muttered. No tracks, no blood, nothing. Our son's reply was flat, cold. Then we keep checking. If they're alive, I'll find them. I have too much on the line. When the engine finally roared to life and faded into the distance, silence returned. But it was not relief that filled me. It was dread. He wouldn't stop. Not until he was certain. That night, under a canopy of stars that gave no comfort, David and I pieced together fragments of memory, trying to understand. Transfers, I whispered. He said that word on the phone. What does he mean? David's jaw tightened. Our accounts, the house, the insurance. A chill spread through me. Insurance, David nodded grimly. Remember the policy we renewed last year? Double indemnity for accidental death. The truth slammed into me. Our son's plan wasn't just about inheritance. It was about cashing in on our deaths, as if we were nothing more than assets to liquidate. The betrayal left me breathless. He had plotted this. Patiently, meticulously. We can't go to the police yet, David said. If he learns we're alive, he'll try again. And if the police tip him off before we have proof? Proof, I echoed numbly. Proof of what? That our son had tried to murder us? That he had accomplices? That his hands were steeped in secrets darker than greed? Sleep eluded us again. Every sound felt like danger, every shadow a threat. Hunger twisted in my stomach until it was a constant ache. By morning I felt hollow, both in body and spirit. We followed the ridge east, searching for a path back toward civilization. But the forest had a cruel sense of humor. It always seemed to twist us back into its heart. By midday, we stumbled upon a campsite. A smoldering fire, empty beer cans, discarded wrappers. Not hunters. These were men with no regard for the land. And near the fire pit, half buried in ash, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A phone. Not ours. Not a stranger's. His. The cracked screen flickered faintly when I picked it up. David hissed for me to be careful, but I couldn't help it. I pressed the power button. The lock screen appeared. Our son's face, smirking in a photo I didn't remember taking. My hand shook as I entered the code I knew he always used. To my shock, it opened. Messages lit the screen. Dozens of them. From names I didn't recognize. Need it handled. No witnesses. Once you get the papers, send them through. Debt cleared after delivery. Don't screw this up. My throat tightened. These weren't just conversations about inheritance. These were deals, arrangements. Our son wasn't just desperate for money. He was tangled in something criminal. David scanned the texts, his face grim. This isn't just about us. He's covering tracks. I scrolled further and a photo appeared. Grainy, taken in low light. It showed a man slumped against a steering wheel, blood pooling beneath his head. My stomach lurched. Murder. He'd been involved in murder, and now we were liabilities. Before I could read further, a snap echoed through the woods. My head shot up. Voices. Closer this time. David grabbed my arm. We have to move. But the phone buzzed in my hand. A new message. Update? Did you find them? The sender's name, RKI, shut the screen off and shoved it into my pocket. If they found us now, the phone would be proof. But it also made us targets. We ran, if it could be called running, through undergrowth that clawed at our skin. My lungs burned. My ribs flared with pain. But fear gave me speed. Behind us, shouts rose. They're close! Over here! Panic surged. David stumbled, nearly falling. but I yanked him upright. Branches whipped across my face. My chest heaved. We burst through a clearing and saw it. An old shack, half collapsed, hidden among the trees. We darted inside, slamming the rotted door behind us. Dust and cobwebs choked the air, but it was shelter. Safety, however fragile. Outside, footsteps closed in. We heard them. One of the men growled. They're here somewhere. David pulled me into the shadows. We crouched low, clinging to silence. My heart thundered so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. The door rattled once, then again. "Check in here," a voice said. My breath froze. And then from just beyond the thin wood came the voice of our son. Calm, certain. They won't get away this time. The shack reeked of rot and mildew, every breath thick with decay. David and I crouched in the shadows, pressed so tightly together I could feel his heartbeat hammering against my arm. Outside, footsteps scraped against the dirt, slow and deliberate. The door creaked. Light spilled in as it opened an inch. My lungs froze. Nothing. One of the men muttered after a beat. Just a dump. Not worth it. The door slammed shut again. Footsteps receded, but our son's voice lingered outside, sharp and suspicious. Spread out. Check the perimeter. They wouldn't have made it far. I held my breath until silence returned, but the silence was different now. Strained, uncertain. They weren't giving up. They were circling, waiting for us to make a mistake. David's hand found mine. His voice was barely audible. We can't stay here. We'll suffocate on fear if we do. He was right. The shack was a coffin waiting to close. When night finally wrapped the forest, we slipped out. Every step was torture. My ribs screamed with each breath, and David leaned heavily on me, his injury worsening. But we pushed forward, deeper into the trees until the shack was only a memory swallowed by shadows. Hours later, the forest thinned. Through the branches, we glimpsed the faint glow of distant lights. Civilization. Hope surged like fire through my veins, but with hope came dread. If we reappeared now, bruised and broken, the first person anyone would contact was our son. He would hear we'd survived, and he'd try again. David's grip tightened on my hand. We need proof before we show ourselves. The phone we had found burned like a weight in my pocket. Proof, yes, but dangerous proof. If he realized it was missing, he'd tear the forest apart to find us. We staggered toward the lights until we reached the edge of a small town. Silent streets stretched before us, lined with shuttered shops and a single glowing diner at the corner. The bell above the diner door jingled as we stepped inside. Warmth, the light, the smell of fried food. It nearly brought me to tears. A waitress looked up, startled by our disheveled state. "Lord have mercy," she breathed. "What happened to you two?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. The truth was too dangerous. "Accident," David said quickly. "Car went off the road. We just need help. Somewhere to rest." The waitress nodded, pity softening her eyes. She fetched water and sandwiches, urging us to sit. My body trembled as I sank into the booth, exhaustion crashing over me. But I didn't eat. Not yet. I pulled out the phone and slid it across to David. "We need to show someone," I whispered. But who? The police seemed the obvious answer, yet fear gnawed at me. What if the officers were compromised? What if our son had connections? David scrolled through the messages again, his jaw tightening. These names, these numbers. We need someone who can trace them. Someone who doesn't answer to him. The waitress returned, setting down steaming mugs of coffee. "There's a motel across the street," she said kindly. "You can get cleaned up there. Room rates are cheap." We thanked her and left quickly, nerves fraying with every step. The motel was a crumbling 2-story relic with flickering neon lights. The clerk barely looked at us as he handed over a key. Inside, the room smelled of smoke and damp carpet, but the door locked, and that was enough. Only when we were alone did we finally breathe. I collapsed onto the bed, sobs tearing through me. David sat beside me, phone glowing in his hand. "We can't stay here long," he said. Tomorrow we find someone to help us. Maybe a lawyer. Maybe a journalist. Someone who can't be bought." I nodded, though dread curled in my stomach. What if there was no one safe? That night I dreamed of the cliff, of falling endlessly, of reaching for a hand that never came. I woke drenched in sweat, the echo of my son's voice in my ears. They won't get away this time. Morning light seeped through thin curtains. David was already awake, hunched over the phone. I went through his photos. He said quietly, "There are more." He showed me images of papers, contracts, signatures forged in our names. Our home's deed, bank transfers, life insurance claims already in motion. My blood ran cold. He wasn't waiting to profit from our deaths. He was already cashing us in. A sudden knock at the door jolted us both. "Room service," a voice called. David froze. We didn't order anything. Another knock, harder this time. I crept to the window, heart hammering. A black SUV sat in the parking lot. He had found us. Panic surged. David grabbed my hand. "Back door." We fled through the narrow bathroom window, landing hard on gravel. Pain ripped through my ribs, but adrenaline drove me forward. We scrambled across the lot, ducking behind dumpsters, weaving between rusting cars. Voices shouted behind us. We ran until the town shrank behind us, lungs burning, legs trembling. Finally, we stumbled into an alley where an old woman was setting out crates of vegetables. She gasped at the sight of us. "Please," I begged. "Help us." Her wary eyes softened. Without a word, she opened the back of her van and motioned for us to climb in. We curled among crates of tomatoes and onions as she drove, the engine rumbling like a lullaby of escape. After a while, she spoke. "Where are you headed?" David met my eyes. He answered firmly. "The city. We need to find someone who will listen." The van carried us away from the town, away from the forest, away from the cliff where everything had ended and begun. As the miles stretched, fear slowly gave way to resolve. We were not just survivors anymore. We were witnesses. And one day soon, our son would see that the dead had returned. Right, the city stretched before us like a beast of concrete and glass, indifferent to the two shadows huddled in the back of a vegetable van. Dawn painted the skyline in dull streaks of orange. After hours of silence, the old woman who'd smuggled us this far finally pulled over near a crowded marketplace. "This is as far as I can take you," she said softly, her weathered eyes full of concern. David helped me down from the van. My body ached as though it had aged decades in days, but my mind was sharper than it had ever been. We thanked her quietly, knowing words were small repayment for what she had risked. She gave us bread wrapped in paper and slipped away into the crowd. For a moment, we stood frozen in the bustling chaos. The world had carried on while we were buried alive in betrayal. People laughed, bartered, hurried to work, unaware of the two ghosts standing among them. David's voice broke through. "First, we find shelter. Then, we find the right person to trust." We spent the morning weaving through streets, searching. Twice I swore I saw a black SUV gliding past, its windows dark and hungry. Paranoia kept my heart pounding. By afternoon, we found refuge in a worn-down hostel tucked between two towering office buildings. The young man at the desk barely looked up as David paid cash for a room. Inside, we collapsed on thin mattresses, the weight of exhaustion nearly crushing. But there was no rest. The phone burned between us, humming with secrets. David scrolled, piecing together the scope of our son's betrayal. It wasn't just money. It was networks, names, offshore accounts. He wasn't acting alone. He was a pawn in something larger. "Look at this," David whispered, showing me a string of messages. Meetings with strangers, mentions of liquidation. And worst of all, the final message sent after our fall. "Confirmed. Assets clear. Proceeding to close accounts." Tears blurred my vision. We weren't just obstacles to him. We were nothing more than boxes checked off on a list. That evening, David made a decision. We can't hide forever. If we don't expose him, he'll erase us for good. We need someone loud, someone untouchable. The answer came in the form of a journalist. David had remembered her name from past articles. Fearless investigations into corruption. Stories that toppled men in power. If anyone could take this evidence and turn it into armor, it was her. We found her office in a cluttered building near the river. I expected to be turned away, but when David whispered the words, "attempted murder," and proof, her assistant ushered us inside. The journalist herself was sharp-eyed, her presence commanding. She listened without interrupting as David laid out everything: the cliff, the betrayal, the phone. When he finished, she leaned back, her fingers steepled. "This," she said finally, "is dynamite. If what you're telling me is true, your son isn't just trying to kill you for money. He's tied to people who won't hesitate to kill me once this comes out." Her gaze was unwavering. "If we do this, there's no turning back." David met her eyes with steel. "There's no turning back for us already." The next hours blurred. She copied files, traced numbers, called contacts with hushed urgency. By the time night fell, she had arranged a safe house where we could hide. "You'll be safe here," she said. "Tomorrow I go public." But safety was an illusion. At midnight, the safe house door rattled violently. Voices barked commands outside. My blood froze. "They found us," I whispered. David shoved me toward the back exit. "Go!" We stumbled into the alley as the door behind us burst open. Men poured in, their shouts chasing us through the night. We ran until our lungs tore, weaving through narrow streets, dodging trash bins and broken fences. Then I saw him, our son. He stepped from the shadows, gun gleaming in his hand. His face was cold, drained of the boy we had once known. "Enough," he said flatly. "You should have stayed dead." I couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed to beg, to plead, but the words caught in my throat. David stepped in front of me, his voice hoarse but strong. "Look at what you've become. Is this who you wanted to be? A murderer? A puppet?" Something flickered in our son's eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He raised the gun. The world slowed. I felt my heart hammer, my breath shallow. But before he could fire, headlights flooded the alley. Tires screeched. The journalist. She had followed. And she wasn't alone. Police spilled from the cars. Weapons raised. "Drop it!" an officer shouted. Our son hesitated, jaw clenched, finger trembling on the trigger. For a heartbeat, I saw the boy who once clung to my hand at the edge of nightmares. But the man standing before me was no longer that boy. He turned the gun toward himself. "No," I screamed, but the shot rang out, shattering the night. He crumpled. The weapon clattered from his hand. I fell to my knees, sobs tearing through me. David knelt beside me, his face buried in his hands. The officers swarmed, securing the scene, but their voices were distant, hollow. Hours later, in a sterile police station, the journalist placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "His death won't erase what he tried to do, but because of you, because of this evidence, others will fall. This story will change everything." I nodded numbly, unable to speak. Days passed. Investigations erupted. Names toppled. Accounts froze. Our son's betrayal became headlines. His face plastered across every screen. To the world, he was a criminal unmasked. To me, he was still the boy I'd rocked to sleep. The boy who had pushed me off a cliff. One morning, David and I walked by the river. The sun soft on our faces. Life moved on around us. Children laughing, dogs barking, couples strolling. David squeezed my hand. "We survived. That has to mean something." I looked at him, at the man who had whispered, "Pretend we're dead when death was certain." He had saved me, not just with his body, but with his will to endure. We had been buried. We had been hunted. We had been broken. But we had also risen. And though the wound of betrayal would never heal, we would carry it together. Proof that even when pushed into the abyss, love can claw its way back. Because in the end, we weren't the ones who died. We were the ones who lived.